Hi guys, Jackie from Famished Farm. Today I'm going to be sharpening the blades on my 1.5" Harbor Freight chipper shredder. This is a 14 amp, so very small, mini size chipper shredder. If you need little limbs done, this guy may be the thing that will do it for you. As I go through this process, I'm going to point out some negatives, and here's the first one. This thing is plastic. So plastic cracks, plastic breaks, and in this case, this knob is threaded into plastic. And unlike a metal sleeve that the metal threaded bolt would come out of, this does not come out easily. I spend like a minute and a half trying to get this thing apart, and this happens nearly every time I try to take this apart. But you'll see me in a little bit here. I'm going to grab a screwdriver, start prying just to get it past whatever piece of plastic is holding it up. If you've looked at the website, this particular item is rated 3.8 out of 5 stars, and at the price point for us, it's been a pretty good chipper. We've had it for 3 summers now, and we use this several times throughout the year. We get lots of wind here in Northwest Alabama, and so I have spent hours and hours with this machine chipping and shredding. Okay, here we go. We finally have it out. Now you're going to see the second negative. Again, this is part of the first negative, really. It's plastic. So this chute that you cram all of your limbs down into eventually will break. And this summer, I finally did something about it, which in my case means duct tape. I don't know if they make a replacement part for it. It's just, to me, it's not worth the trouble. But here we go. We're going to get into the meat of the issue here. We're going to remove the 8 screws that hold this cover. This covers the blades. We're going to take these 8 screws off. And like I said, we've done this sharpening bit a lot. So the screws seem to be of really good quality. They've never stripped. And I guess that would be another reason down the road that might be something you'd have to replace. But for us, knock on wood, the screws seem to have held up through several blade sharpenings a lot. And here we go. This is the actual blades. These are 2-sided blades, and there's 4 bolts that have a hex head on them. And so I've got my hex drivers here, and I'm not sure exactly how you should do this, but there's 2 slots that you can jam a screwdriver up into so it will hold this rotating blade assembly. You want it to hold still. So once I get that in the right spot, then I can take out the bolts, and there you see what the blades look like. And I'm happy to see there's no major nicks or anything in them, so the blades themselves are great quality. Now, with most projects, there's a million ways you can do this, and I'm going to choose, and I've done this the last several times, I pull out my little tiny baby vise, I grab my cordless drill, and I use these metal sanding flap wheels that just fit right into the chuck of my cordless drill. This was a suggestion from my friend Darlene, who this is how she sharpens her lawnmower blades. So I thought it was just a genius idea. Now I've got 3 of these different discs, all in different sizes. So I'm just picking the one with the biggest grit, and I want to say it's a 40, 60, 80. I can't quite see what the number is on this, but if I recall, it seemed like Home Depot only had 3 different grits available, but whatever you find, just 3 different, coarse, medium, and fine is what you're looking for. When you put your blade in the vise, I just use the holes in the blade to judge that it's even, because that is important. You'll want this to be as even as possible. And then it takes a couple times for me to remember which way I actually do the grinding. I you want to get the right angle, which is as close to the angle that the blade is already cut in. And this is really a super fast project. It takes probably under 15 seconds with each wheel on each side of the blade. And remember, this is two-sided, so I'm going to flip the blade over and then I'm going to do the other side also. The face of these blades gets tree sap and other things on it, so it gets gunky. And to make it easier to get the hex bolts on and off, I try to clean up the face of that also, so there's not as much sappiness to it. If I took some mineral spirits or some kind of cutter to it, that would probably work too. But the last couple times I've just carefully used this flap wheel to clean off the face of the blade also. Now I'm going to give you kind of a close-up here. This is not real close, but you can just see more the angle of the blade and what I'm trying to do to sharpen it. I don't know, technically this might be considered honing. All as I know is it results in a sharpened blade or a improved blade, so I can chip through my little branches much faster. So I'm going to speed through the process of doing both blades, and I do all four sides of the blades at one time using the same grit. So it's in and out of the vise 4 different times on each grit. This is the second of these chipper shredders that we've owned. We had one up in Illinois in our tiny house, and we used it mainly for the same kind of thing, tree limbs that came down and garden waste. I had a lot of ornamental grasses and baptisias and that kind of thing that I wanted to shred down to use as compost, and this did a great job for it. Although my brother, who is used to very more commercial type products, just shook his head when he saw me using this thing because he thought it was just ridiculous. So here's another one of the negatives. It will do up to 1.5 inch limb with this caveat. If that is a straight piece of wood, it goes in and out just fine. But if there's any types of little crooks and turns to your wood, you're going to have some issues. So a lot of times I will do just the straightest part of the wood, and then if it starts having other branches that have come and gone off of it, I just throw those pieces into the fire pit to be used for a beautiful fire one night when we want to sit outside and enjoy the flames. But, it's not going to do 1.5 inch piece of wood that has a, 45-degree bend in it. So it will do smaller pieces, 1/2 inch, 1 inch, but it's not going to do, 1.5 inches if it's got bends and turns to it. So straight pieces of wood, 1.5 inches, does just a great job. Now, like I said, this is our second one that we've owned, and I think if I had my druthers, I would like to spend a few $100s and get like a 3.5 or 4.5 inch one, and those are more than a couple $100, but you can probably get them in the $400 to $600 range through most of the big box or Harbor Freight type places. And yes, I would be able to use one of those bigger ones with no problem. But would I want to use it? They kind of frighten me, to be perfectly honest with you. I grew up watching Fargo, Freddy Krueger movies, and I just know that that's a real easy way to lose a limb quickly, if not dispose of a whole body. So I don't know. I think that this one for my stage in life is just perfectly fine. And we do have the ability to either use the bigger logs in either the fire pit or use them in planting beds. So I'm okay with the limitation that this one will only do very small limbs. Now, another potential limitation is that this is an electric corded product. And so if you're off grid, you're going to need to figure out a way to power this. And if it, I guess this would run on a generator just fine. It's 14 amps. I'm not sure if that's would draw too much power or not, but again, my husband he grew up, his dad owned a machine shop. He was an engineer. He owned a machine shop when he retired to Florida, and Rod spent lots of time in that machine shop, and he does not want to mess with gas engines. Small engine repair is not his forte. It just is one of those things. He would rather hire that kind of stuff to be done. So if we can find a product that does what, 80%, 90% of what we need it to do, and it does not have an engine, then he is on board. So when I talk about getting these bigger ones, they're all gas powered, and he is very hesitant. So to some people, the electric power would be a negative. In our particular case, it's a positive. It's lightweight. That is a positive in our case. We, pull it down the driveway, beside the driveway where a lot of the trees are and where the fire pit is, where we chip often. And you can easily maneuver it to where you need to get it, like up and over limbs and branches, and position it exactly where you want it. It also fits in a, relatively small, 12 by 12 type metal shed, and it's got to go alongside the mower. And unfortunately, that means I have to pick it up if the mower is in there and lift it over the back tire. And so this thing is so light that it is not a problem. Another positive, and this is kind of a ridiculous little thing, but this came with a very nice bag that attaches to the bottom of the chipper shredder. And the bag is similar to the material that one of those blue or brown tarps is made out of. It's, in this case, it happens to be black, but that little bag is worth its weight in gold. It's just the perfect size for once you fill up the bag to hump it over across the yard and put it in the flower bed that you want to mulch. And I have used that for other projects too, but it is just the greatest little bag, and it has stood up to, like I said, 3 years of, constant use when the thing is being used. And I'll just mention also that it does come with a plastic tamper that you can use to kind of force things if things get kind of clogged up down in the chute, that you can use to stuff things into the chute. It also works for things like leaves and grasses that maybe don't have enough stiffness in them to force down into the chute. This tamper will do that for you. Now, I don't hardly ever use it when I'm chipping, like on a half-day chipping job. I may use it certainly less than a handful of times. So it's something that I could probably do without, but for now it's nice to have it, although I wouldn't rate it as a positive or a negative. I will say that when we lived in Illinois, and the one that we used up there, and I mentioned that we did more grasses type thing, it was very handy. I used it much more frequently for those type of jobs. For branches, not so much. It's not really needed. And here's another negative, or something that you at least need to be aware of. This thing is loud, and you really need to use ear protection and do as I say, not as I do. Until very recently, I never used ear protection, and every time my husband would walk up on me using it, he'd say, you really need to put your ears on. And I don't know, I've just got this thing about that. But since then, I have bought a pair of ear protection that I keep with the chipper. So the next time that I'm using it, for, 4, 5, 6 hours, I will have proper ear protection. So we're finishing up. I think this is our final side on the final blade. And so we're going to be undoing the blade from the vise, and I'll show you just a quick look of what that looks like. I'm going to take a few minutes and clean up all of these little tools that I pulled out to do this project before I put the base back up on the table here to put it back together. I'm going to take just a second here and brush out all of the loose debris that I can see and just kind of clean up the inside of the chipper shredder. The first time I did this project, I didn't really pay attention when I took the blades off, and I was kind of worried that I wouldn't get them back in the same direction, but it is pretty much foolproof, guys. The blades, the holder actually has a very specific slant to it, so you can see which way the blade needs to go. So you can see there it fits right nicely in that little pocket. And the blade has a flat side and then a side that there is room for the hex head to fit flush with the blade. So there's that little indentation in it, and I don't know what that's called, but it's your bolt will fit in there perfectly flush once you've got it all tightened up. I'll try to show you what that looks like on the actual blade. It may or may not show up on the camera well. That's the flat side, and there's the side with the bevels. And then we'll get this last blade on here and use our hex key to get everything all tightened up. And then the cover for the blade. Again, this was another thought that I would not be able to get this back together, but it's very specific which way it goes. There's a deep end and a shallow end, so you cannot put this back the wrong way. And we're just gonna, again, rinse and repeat on our 8 screws. So this part is totally optional. I'm just trying to prevent this whole chute from falling apart. So I'm going to take a couple minutes here and shore up my previous duct tape job. And I'm going to add a little bit of plastic from a plastic drinking bottle to the part of the chute that is missing a couple pieces. It would be super nice if they offered some kind of chute sleeve that would fit in there to shore up this broken plastic. But at the price point that this particular model is, I don't think that that's something that they would ever do. But gosh, if Harbor Freight was listening, and any company that makes these little chipper shredders that are gonna eventually break, especially the part where you're ramming your limbs down into it, that is obviously a weak point in your design. And to have something that you could easily switch out, once you've done what I've done to this one here over the last 3 summers, it would be nice to have something that I could replace it with. Have I mentioned that my ancestors were Scottish? Well, I am very thrifty, and this little chipper shredder still has many more years of service in it, so I'm just going to baby it to make it last as long as we can possibly make it last. And maybe by the time I'm ready to replace it, my husband will feel like we need a 3.5-inch chipper, and I'll put that on my wish list for down the road. So far, the tape has not caused any issues with the blades and the operation of the chipper shredder. I do the same process every time I sharpen the blades, so I do refresh the tape pretty frequently. And here's how the outside cover goes back on. And then I'll show you the safety feature. There's a little metal tab on the back side here, you'll see it. And if that is not slotted into the receiver, the chipper shredder will not turn on. And a little closer up view of the knob that gives me so much trouble every time I go to take the cover off. And this is how long it should take to get it on and off. That's a pretty good view too of the on-off toggle, and then there's a little breaker switch to the left. Guys, I hope this has been helpful to you. If you like our content, please like and subscribe. And if you have any comments on how I could be doing what I just did easier, faster, safer, leave them in the comments below. Thanks for being here.